Hi there, everyone. Will Dupree here in the KXAN live studio. We are listening in to an event that's happening in Pearl Harbor right now to commemorate the 75th anniversary of the ending of World War II. Let's take a listen. The ceremony will last several hours and we plan to carry it all. So thanks for joining us.
And follow the route these historic aircraft take as they make their way to Pearl Harbor. Flying in groups based on type and speed, most of them traveling at speeds approaching 190 miles per hour, they will fly over the USS Missouri, tipping their wing in tribute. Watch closely because as they pass, whether you're watching them from the shores of Pearl Harbor or at any point along their route, most of the aircraft will be visible for just 20 to 25 seconds. Men and women who have come to be known as the greatest generation flew all of the aircraft that you will see today. 3/4 of a century ago, they left their peacetime lives to fight oppression and to defend our freedom in every corner of the globe. We are grateful for their bravery, sacrifice, and service. And we are here today to celebrate G.I. Joe and Rosie the Riveter. In a speech he made in December of 1940, President Franklin Roosevelt recognized that the Great Legacy of Peace aerial parade would play a pivotal role in our country's anticipated involvement in the war that was already raging across much of the world. President Roosevelt understood the raw power of the United States and its people when its will and resources were focused on a single common goal would be unstoppable and immediately recognizable. He knew that once this country became involved in hostilities, the immense U.S. industrial complex would transition from the peacetime manufacture of automobiles, tractors, bicycles, and airliners to the wartime production of jeeps, tanks, machine guns, and warplanes. And he was right. For the second time in less than 1/4 of a century, the American people were called on to help save the world from the forces of tyranny and oppression. And in the battlefields of Europe, the islands and waters of the South Pacific, and in the factories throughout this great nation of ours, they responded to that challenge as Americans always have. In the intervening years, the stories of those brave Americans and what they did has been told, but told so less frequently. In the history books and in the classrooms of our schools, the narrative of World War II has been reduced to a few paragraphs or a day or two of instruction. Those stories which fundamentally changed the world for the better deserve more. Americans should know that not so very long ago, our way of life, our freedom, and the fate of much of the world hung in the balance. And the resolve with which this country rose to that challenge is, even 75 years later, awe-inspiring. Over the last several months, as we've prepared for this commemoration and the historic flyover that will begin in just a few minutes, we identified several themes common to all who helped earn the Allied victory in World War II. First, everyone participated, if not in uniform, then working in the factories, building machines, and producing munitions and supplies that our boys put to such effective use on dozens of different battlefields around the world. Second, there is a genuine, heartfelt humility among those men and women who willingly walked into harm's way to protect and defend this country. Finally, and most poignantly, the deep respect that the veterans here with us today have for those who they consider to be the real heroes of World War II, those men who did not come home. Those warriors gave their last full measure of devotion to the epic struggles that took place 7 decades ago in faraway places like Midway, Burma, Bataan, Coral Sea, Guadalcanal, Leyte Gulf, Tinian, and Tarawa. Today, it is our challenge and our great honor to use a remarkable collection of vintage military aircraft to tell their stories. We'll start this Legacy of Peace aerial parade with the airplanes that were used to teach our boys to fly, the trainers. In 1938, when General Hap Arnold, commander of America's Air Forces, considered this country's preparedness for war, he recognized that America did not have nearly enough airplanes or pilots to fly them. 3 years before the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, what would later become the U.S. Army Air Forces consisted of 21,000 airmen and 1,800 aircraft. By the end of the war, the Army Air Forces included 2.3 million people, and production of aircraft of all types reached nearly 300,000. In a war that military leaders quickly discovered would be determined by air superiority, this unprecedented, almost inconceivable increase in American air power was widely recognized to be one of the most important factors in the Allies' success. But 3 years before Pearl Harbor, the arsenal of democracy had not yet been activated, and the United States was looking at an immense disparity between what it had and what it would soon need. So, drawing on the expertise of prominent aviation leaders, the military created what would become the Civilian Pilot Training Program. By the time this program ended, it had trained 435,000 pilots, including future astronaut and Senator John Glenn, Triple Ace Bud Anderson, and Tuskegee Airman Robert Dietz. All military pilots completed a training program that was accomplished in 3 phases: primary, basic, and advanced. This process was designed to gradually increase the complexity of the pilot's training. Primary introduced the pilot to the principles of flight. Basic introduced them to the complexities of radio communication and flying in formation. And advanced training was designed to prepare the air crews to go into combat. One of the iconic trainers was the Boeing Stearman biplane, an open cockpit aircraft constructed of wood, fabric, and tubular steel. There were more than 24 different variants of the Stearman designed, and more than 10,000 were built. Another primary trainer was the Fairchild PT-19, a monoplane that was used by the U.S. Army Air Forces, the British Royal Air Force, and the Royal Canadian Air Force. Like the Stearman, the PT-19 was an open cockpit design. Advanced training was accomplished in an aircraft like the North American Texan, weighing in at nearly 3 tons with a 600 horsepower radial engine and retractable landing gear. The Texan was designed to prepare pilots to fly the state-of-the-art aircraft that would be used in combat. By the end of the war, North American had built more than 15,000 Texans, including the AT-6 variant for the Army Air Forces and the SNJ version for the U.S. Navy. The AT-11, known as the Twin Beach, in civilian life also served many functions, including as a training platform for bombing, navigation, and gunnery. On the other side of the Atlantic, the British used the venerable de Havilland Tiger Moth biplane as their primary trainer. This iconic aircraft played a key role in preparing virtually every British and Commonwealth military pilot over a 2-decade period beginning in 1932. In total, nearly 9,000 were built, and many are still flown by civilian pilots in the UK and throughout the rest of the world. In the early days of World War II, the Army and Navy did not yet have sufficient resources to patrol and protect shipping routes in the Atlantic and in the Gulf of Mexico at a time when German submarines were prowling the waters off the eastern shores of the country and sinking vitally important tankers. The military senior leadership at that time asked for help from the newly formed Civil Air Patrol, an organization of civilian pilots volunteering to use their aircraft in defense of the nation. Armed with small bombs and depth charges, the CAP's Coastal Patrol used light single-engine aircraft like the Stinson L-5 Sentinel, the Aranca L-16 Champion, and the Piper L-4 Grasshopper to fly missions from 21 bases from Maine all the way to Texas over an 18-month period. The Civil Air Patrol spotted 173 possible submarines, attacked 57, and dropped 82 bombs. It also flew over 24 million miles during 5,684 convoy support missions. Its efforts helped the military push the submarine threat well away from coastal shipping lanes, but not without a cost. The Coastal Patrol suffered 26 fatalities and 90 aircraft lost during the early years of the war. In addition to Coastal Patrol, CAP pilots performed many other critical tasks, including search and rescue, target towing, border patrol, forest fire patrol, interceptor training, and dozens of other missions. When Pearl Harbor was attacked by carrier-based aircraft of the Japanese Navy, the only modern U.S. Army Air Forces fighter stationed in Hawaii was the Curtiss P-40, an all-metal, 300-mile-per-hour 1937 design. The P-40 was rapidly overtaken by far more capable fighters, but at 8 o'clock in the morning on December 7th, 1941, that airplane was our country's first line of defense against 350 Japanese fighters, bombers, and torpedo planes launched from 6 aircraft carriers. By 9 a.m. that day, more than 2,400 Americans had been killed. Much of the Navy fleet had been ruined, and more than half of the Army Air Force's aircraft on Oahu were damaged beyond use. The lone aerial opposition came from individual pilots like Lieutenant George S. Welch, Lieutenant Kenneth A. Taylor, and Lieutenant Philip N. Rasmussen, who raced for any airplane they could find. Flying P-40s, much like those you see here, pilots shot down a number of Japanese aircraft on that day of infamy. 2 weeks after the attack on Pearl Harbor, 100 recruits, led by Claire Chennault, one of the most gifted and controversial commanders of the war, began flying P-40s to protect China from Japan. In 7 months before the American volunteer group, the Flying Tigers, was disbanded and incorporated into the 23rd Fighter Group of the Army Air Forces, they savaged bombers from Japan and immortalized the fierce shark's teeth paint scheme on the nose of their P-40s. In April of 1942, after a series of stinging setbacks in the Pacific, Lieutenant Colonel Jimmy Doolittle led 16 B-25 Mitchell bombers off the USS Hornet on a bombing raid to Tokyo and 4 other cities. The raid resulted in only minor damage to its targets, but it had profound impact on Japanese strategy, causing military leaders to be more concerned about attacks on Japan than they otherwise would be. But the B-25's contribution to the war effort was not limited to the Doolittle raid. The aircraft had an important role in every battle theater of World War II. In the Pacific, it provided close air support, strafed Japanese tanks and airfields, and destroyed bridges. In Europe, the Mitchell operated as a medium bomber, and the Navy and Marine Corps used the PBJ-1 variant to find and destroy enemy ships. During the war, B-25s were also flown by the British, Canadians, Dutch, Australians, Soviets, Brazilians, and the Chinese. In early June of 1942, the Japanese and American navies converged on a tiny volcanic island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and the stage was set for a dramatic shift in momentum in the Pacific theater. Tipped off to Japanese plans by U.S. cryptographers who had broken Japanese radio codes, PBY Catalina flying boats were deployed from Midway Island to search hundreds of miles of ocean for enemy ships. One of them found the Japanese fleet steaming toward Midway. The crew radioed the information back to military leadership. The large, lumbering 2-engine seaplane had provided the U.S. with an early advantage in the coming battle. From 3 U.S. carriers, F-4F Wildcats flew escort for slower Devastator and Dauntless bombers, but logistical problems and bad luck plagued the Americans as they began their attack. Most of the American torpedo bombers were shot out of the sky. In the first 3 hours of the battle, not a single U.S. bomb or torpedo hit a Japanese ship, despite 8 separate attacks by a total of 94 American aircraft. Then the tide turned. As the Japanese focused their attention on the torpedo bombers flying just off the surface of the water, SBD Dauntless dive bombers attacked from higher altitude, fatally damaging 3 of 4 Japanese carriers, and an hour later, a second attack by dive bombers led to the destruction of the 4th Japanese carrier. The balance of naval power in the Pacific had shifted permanently. When the U.S. Marines stormed the shores of Guadalcanal in August of 1942, Japanese conquest had reached their peak. This bold, unexpected offensive would prove to be a critical turning point in the war in the Pacific. A small but strategic airfield on the island was the focal point of 6 months of fierce battle on the ground, in the air, and on the sea. By the time the Japanese conceded the island in February of 1943, nearly 25,000 Japanese and 1,600 Americans had been killed, with thousands more dead from malaria and other tropical diseases. Central to the battle was the venerable Grumman F-4F Wildcat, which was operated from carriers by U.S. Navy pilots and from Henderson Field by Marine Corps pilots throughout the Guadalcanal campaign. When the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, the sturdy and resilient Wildcat was the principal and most advanced fighter for both the Navy and the Marines in the Pacific. Later in 1942, Bell P-39 Airacobras, assigned to the U.S. Army Air Forces, joined the Wildcats of the Marine Corps, operating from Henderson Field. The Airacobra had success in other theaters as well, and were part of the vital so-called Cactus Air Force defending Guadalcanal. Like the Wildcat, the P-39 was outmatched by the faster, more agile Mitsubishi Zero, flown by Japanese carrier-based fighter pilots. Both the Wildcats and Airacobras were able to get their own hold against those Zeros because of their rugged construction, the unique battle tactics developed by aviators, and the skill of the men who flew them. And now, Yamamoto's final flight. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto was commander-in-chief of the Japanese Combined Fleet and mastermind of Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor. In the spring of 1943, American cryptographers intercepted and decoded a message with Yamamoto's itinerary for a trip between 2 islands in the Solomon Island chain in the South Pacific. On April 18th, a flight of 18 Lockheed P-38 Lightning aircraft were dispatched from Cookham Field on Guadalcanal on a long, low-altitude, circuitous route designed to evade enemy radar, maximize the element of surprise, and attack. The twin-engine, twin-tail P-38 was uniquely suited to the challenges of this mission. No other fighter deployed in the Pacific had the long-range capability to fly 600 miles over open ocean, intercept enemy aircraft at a certain point and at a certain time, engage them in battle, and then make the return trip of 400 miles. Over the skies of the Pacific, the American P-38s intercepted 2 Japanese bombers carrying Admiral Yamamoto and his staff, escorted by 6 fighters. They destroyed both of the bombers, killing Yamamoto. The mission, nicknamed Operation Vengeance, not only avenged the deaths of 2,400 Americans at Pearl Harbor, it also deprived the Japanese of one of their finest military strategists. Mustangs to the rescue. In the early days of the war, after the Allies had decided that the British would conduct nighttime bombing raids on German targets and the Americans would bomb during daylight hours, mission losses that occurred beyond the range of fighters like the P-47 Thunderbolt were horrific. Without fighter escorts, the U.S. bombers suffered unsustainable losses to German fighters. Some estimates put the fatality rate of B-17 and B-24 crews at nearly 50%. That began to change with the introduction of the P-51 Mustang as a long-range fighter when outfitted with external fuel tanks made of a kind of papier-mâché, a non-strategic material. The Mustang could fly more than 2,000 miles equipped this way. 6 Browning 50 caliber machine guns, excellent maneuverability, and the aggressive tactics flown by fearless and highly trained pilots made the P-51 an impressive dogfighter. Some of the young men who flew the Mustang were pilots from the 332nd Fighter Group, the first African-American fighter unit. They provided escort to missions over Italy during 1944 and 45, commanded by West Point graduate Colonel Benjamin Davis. The Red Tails, a nickname based on the identification paint on their airplanes, shot down 111 German aircraft. By D-Day, the combined bomber offensive from England and Italy had broken the German Air Force. The P-51 also served in the Pacific Theater as a long-range fighter, flying from forward air bases and using the same techniques as in Europe. The P-51 was instrumental in long-range bombing missions. George H.W. Bush. In early September of 1944, 4 Grumman TBM Avengers operating off the light carrier USS San Jacinto attacked Japanese military installations close to the island of Chichijima, approximately 500 miles south of mainland Japan. Piloting one of those 4 Navy aircraft was future U.S. President George H.W. Bush, who was tasked with destroying a particular radio tower. Although the mission was successful and the target was destroyed, all 4 aircraft were subject to intense anti-aircraft fire. During the attack, Bush's aircraft was hit and his engine caught fire. He flew several miles from the island and ordered his crew of 2 to put on their parachutes and to prepare to bail out. Of the 9 airmen who escaped their planes that day, Bush was the only one to survive. After floating in his inflatable raft for 4 hours, he was rescued by the USS Finback, a rescue submarine. By the end of 1944, Bush had flown 58 combat missions and received the Distinguished Flying Cross. The Avenger was a torpedo bomber manufactured by both Grumman and General Motors. Nearly 10,000 were manufactured and served in the U.S. Navy, the Royal Navy, the Royal Canadian Navy, and the Royal New Zealand Air Force. Immortalized forever by the photo of Marines raising the U.S. flag over Mount Suribachi, the Battle of Iwo Jima helped to secure 3 airfields and provided the United States with an important staging area for the much-anticipated invasion of the Japanese homeland, as well as an emergency landing field for Japan-bound bombers and a home base for fighter escorts. It is a testament to the ferocity of the fighting on Iwo Jima that more than 25,000 U.S. Marines were killed or wounded during 35 days of fighting in February and March of 1945, and nearly 19,000 Japanese soldiers were killed as well. It was the only battle of the war in which U.S. casualties exceeded those of the Japanese. Carrier-based chance-fought F-4U Corsair fighters were critical to American success during the battle for Iwo Jima. As originally designed, the pilot sat far back in the fuselage of the Corsair, and his view was restricted because of the 2,000 horsepower engine, 13-foot diameter propeller, and huge fuel tank, making landings extremely challenging on the pitching deck of a carrier. So early models went to land-based Marine pilots who put the aircraft's speed and heavy armament to effective use in both dogfights and in ground support. Eventually, Corsair pilots shot down 11 Japanese aircraft for every Corsair lost. By the beginning of 1945, Marine Corps pilots were flying low-level missions with bombs, rockets, and napalm in support of their fellow Marines on the beaches and in the jungles of small islands throughout the South Pacific, including Iwo Jima. The Japanese nickname for the Corsair was Whistling Death. The Boeing B-29 Super Fortress carried a bomb load of 10,000 pounds on its 2,000-mile round trip to Japan. At an altitude of 30,000 feet, it was able to fly above most of Japan's home island defenses. Instead of conventional gun turrets, the B-29's defensive weapons were linked through a remote control system that was a marvel in the 1940s. By the time B-29s entered the war, an earlier generation of heavy bombers had leveled much of Germany. So the super fortresses were deployed to China and later in the Mariana Islands. The move to the islands put the aircraft within 1,500 miles of Tokyo, well within the bombers' range. With their large numbers and vast payloads, it wasn't long before the B-29s had destroyed nearly every strategic target in Japan. The only aircraft then capable of delivering the world's first nuclear bombs, modified super fortresses, joined their comrades in the summer of 1945. On August 6th, the B-29 Enola Gay dropped a uranium bomb on the Japanese city of Hiroshima. 3 days later, Boxcar targeted Nagasaki with a plutonium bomb. On August 14th, the Japanese surrendered unconditionally. The surrender was formalized in a ceremony on board the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay on September 2nd, 1945. Over 12 million Americans answered the nation's call over the course of the Second World War. During the 45 months that the U.S. was involved, more than 400,000 servicemen would pay the ultimate price for freedom, meeting death on the ground and in the skies over war-torn continents or in the seas between them. The cost of ultimate victory must never be forgotten. Ladies and gentlemen, 75 years ago today, the world rejoiced. Throughout America and in Honolulu were scenes of immense impromptu street parties. Huge celebrations were held in Chicago, Los Angeles, Miami, and especially New York's Times Square. Every contributor to the Legacy of Peace aerial parade had done their part, from the servicemen fighting for their country overseas to the factory workers and businesses providing those servicemen and servicewomen with the weapons of war that were so vital to their success, to the families who went without so that the boys overseas could have all that they needed. Securing peace was a collaborative effort, a triumph that the entire country could be proud of. And 3/4 of a century later, we are no less proud. For all of those here today who played a role in America's success in World War II, whether in a military or civilian capacity, thank you. Thank you for your service. For all others, thanks for joining us here today to help commemorate our country's peace achievement in World War II and recognize the men and women who made it possible. Many thanks once again to the government agencies that helped make today's aerial parade possible, to the nonprofit organizations that helped to plan and conduct this historic event, to the pilots participating in the flyover, and especially to our sponsors, including our presenting sponsor, the Bob Hope Legacy, as part of the Bob and Dolores Hope Foundation. My name is Dave Price, and it has been a great honor and pleasure to spend time with you here today to commemorate the Allied achievement 75 years ago.
They are known as the greatest generation. 75 years ago, they ushered in an era of peace after years of violence and war. As we salute their service, we continue to keep their legacy alive. The skies above the massive battles they took part in were filled with warplanes. And many of those surviving aircraft are still maintained and operational to this day. They are known as the warbirds. They traveled thousands of miles to return to Pearl Harbor, flying across the United States and embarking on board the mighty USS Essex, a modern Navy warship bearing the namesake of the legendary aircraft carrier which fought in the Pacific Theater 75 years ago. They are more than just old planes. The warbirds still fly today because we won't let them be lost to the footnotes of history. We keep them flying to honor all those who fought, shed their blood, and died to ensure our freedom and the liberation of millions across the globe from tyranny. As we watch these aircraft take to the skies once again, soaring above the Pacific, remember what they represent. To the greatest generation, we salute your service and honor your hope on this day and forever.
To all the World War II veterans who couldn't be here, we miss you, and we want to tell you that we
salute your service.
Thanks, Bob. I'll see you.
Sorry to cut you off. Before we get started, take a look around us. Today, the harbor is filled with U.S. and foreign ships, including the U.S. Michael Murphy, the USS Chung Hoon, USS Hopper, and USS Essex, all from the United States. Foreign ships include the RSS Supreme from Singapore, FS Bougainville from France, KDB Darussalam from Brunei, and the BRP Jose Rizal from the Philippines, all here to honor and salute our greatest generation. Please turn your attention to the starboard side, if you would. There you'll see the Arleigh Burke-class destroyer USS Michael Murphy. The ship is named for Navy SEAL Lieutenant Michael P. Murphy, who was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor for his heroic actions during Operation Red Wings in Afghanistan in 2005. The men and women of this ship represent today all the active duty military men and women assigned throughout the Pacific and around the globe, who strive each day to meet the standards of determination, courage, and selflessness demonstrated by our greatest generation. As such, these sailors, soldiers, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guardmen, with our many partner and allied navies, stand ready and resolved to defend and sustain the free and open Indo-Pacific earned in blood 75 years ago. Pass and review. Thank you. Please take your seats. I did. I'll repeat. I'll repeat for all military personnel in uniform, this is an indoor, uncovered ceremony. Veterans, other distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, aloha and welcome to the Battleship Missouri Memorial here at historic Pearl Harbor. It is 9:02 a.m., the moment 75 years ago when this ceremony began on this ship. As you may have heard and seen, the Legacy of Peace aerial parade by many World War II warbirds kicked off this morning's ceremony with just a short time ago across Oahu skies. My name is Michael Carr. I'm the President and Chief Executive Officer of the USS Missouri Memorial Association. It's an honor to serve in that capacity and to be your MC for today's ceremony as we commemorate a huge milestone, the 75th anniversary of one of the most significant events in history, the ending of World War II. First and foremost, I have the honor of welcoming our special guests, the World War II veterans who are with us here today. I'm going to name them individually and ask that you stand, if you're able, as your name is called, and remain standing. Please hold your applause till the end so we may honor them collectively for their service, for their courage, and for their sacrifice. Mr. Refugio Alcon, Victor Ariola, Oscar Bangui, Saldme Calderon, Walter Ching, Jack Detour, Paul Newman, Wendell Newman, Theodore Richardson, Arthur Schack, Lambert Y., and Joseph Young. Ladies and gentlemen, our World War II veterans. It's an honor to have you in our company today. The following World War II veterans also call Hawaii home, but unfortunately were unable to join us in person for today's ceremony. I'd like to take just a moment to recognize them by name. They are Julio Ramon, Arthur Ching, Raymond Ching, Narzal Concepcion, Rodrigo Diaz, and William Lum. Next, I want to recognize our World War II veterans who had made plans to travel from the mainland and join us here today on the Battleship Missouri Memorial, including 14 veterans who witnessed the ceremony on September 2nd, 1945. In the end, these heroes were unable to travel due to concerns for their health as a result of the COVID-19 virus. We're very saddened to have to make that call, but it was done for the sake of their health. Please turn your attention to the screens as we honor them. Fame Academia, Seaman Euler, Petty Officer First Class, U.S. Merchant Marines, U.S. Navy, Manila, Philippines, Subic Bay. Carlisle Agrigilius, Corporal Marine Corps, Los Angeles, California. Gordon Barker, MM-3C, Navy, Springfield, Massachusetts. Albert Bloomer, Second Class, U.S. Navy Gunner's Mate, Dunaba, California. Doyle Boothroyd, Airman Second Class, Navy, Goodland, Kansas. Thomas Bristol, Sergeant, Army Air Corps, Fair Lawn, New Jersey. Jack Brock, S-1, Navy, Los Angeles, California. Lee Broussard, Y-3C, Navy, Lareauville, Louisiana. Edgar Buffman, Gunner's Mate Second Class, Navy, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Robert Chapman, PFC, St. Louis, Missouri. Andre Chapaz, Tech 5, U.S. Army, San Francisco, California. James Climo, Staff Sergeant, U.S. Marine Corps, Los Angeles, California. Judge Davis, Seaman First Class, U.S. Navy, Division F, Union City, Tennessee. Donato De Filippis, Seaman First Class, Navy, Brooklyn, New York. Arthur Del Rey. O.M. Mike, Navy, Pasadena, California. Farland Duberry, Sergeant First Class, Army 96th, Seattle, Washington. Lindsay Edwards, FC-3 Navy, Gentry, Arkansas. Herbert Elfring, Captain Army, 251st Coast Artillery, San Diego, California. Manuel Flores, Buck Sergeant, U.S. Marine Corps, Boston, Massachusetts. Donald Fosberg, S-2C, Radio Max Navy, Los Angeles, California. Armando Gallela, Sergeant Major, Army, North Tarrytown, New York. Richard Grantham, Quartermaster 3rd Class, Navy, Pasadena, California. Edward Greenfield, Lieutenant, Navy, New York, New York. Chester Gross, Seaman First Class, Navy, New Caney, Texas. William Haller, AOM2, Navy, Martinsville, New Jersey.
We knew a possibility we may not come back, but we didn't dwell on that. We dwelled on the fact that we're going in to end the war in our favor. And that's what we did. So that winning the war meant keeping American freedom.
You could not get a better education than going into the service and fight for your country that you believe in. If you live anywhere in the world besides America, you'll know the reason why. There's no other place better than the good old USA.
Elmer Haley, Pharmacist Mate 3rd Class, Navy Medical Corpsman, Huntsville, Missouri. Thiele Harvey, Private, United States Marine Corps, Odessa, Texas. Stuart Headley, S-1C, Navy, Buffalo, New York. Clayton Hilliard, Sergeant, United States Marine Corps, Kenosha, Wisconsin. Jack Holder, AMM-1 Navy, Newcastle, Texas. William Hook, Corporal, United States Marine Corps, New York, New York. Robert Jackson, SAO-2C, Navy, Monroe, Wisconsin. Robert Kemp, QM-3, Navy, Baltimore, Maryland. Robert Kennedy, E-2M2, United States Navy, Electronic Maintenance, Canisteo, New York. Walter Kocher, U.S. Navy, Benton, Pennsylvania. Dean Ladd, Lieutenant Colonel Marines, Spokane, Washington. Elmer Larson, Staff Sergeant, Army Air Corps, Marinette, Wisconsin. Leo Ligoy, RT-3 Navy, Reno, Nevada. Joseph Leonetti, F-1 Class, Navy, Chicago, Illinois. Albert Liberator, MOMM-1 Navy, Scranton, Pennsylvania. Donald Long, Commander, Navy, Barnum, Minnesota. Albert Machado, Sergeant, Army Air Corps, New Bedford, Massachusetts. Neil McCallum, Corporal, United States Marine Corps, Candor, North Carolina. Robert McGranahan, S-1C, Navy, Albany, New York. Hugh McNaughton, AOM-3C, Navy, VPB-27, Portland, Oregon. Donald McPherson, Ensign, U.S. Navy Air Corps, Adams, Nebraska. Jimmy Mansour, Corporal, USAAC, La Crosse, Wisconsin. Charles Montanaro, Oiler, Merchant Marine, San Diego, California. Eugene Morse, EM-3 Navy, Spokane, Washington. Lincoln Mott, RM Tech 3, U.S. Navy, Tuckerton, New Jersey. Gilbert Nadeau, Signalman 3rd Class Navy, Beverly, Massachusetts.
They were starting to go up in a V, and some guy caught it, and he jumped up. He says, "The war is over!" And all the guys said, "The war is over!" And they all ran for their tent. They got the M1 rifle. They came out and started squeezing clips and pop, pop, pop into the sky. That's how. I mean, the guys were yeah. They were letting their enthusiasm go. You know, yeah, it was great. It was great. And next morning, the officers collected all the rifles. I hate it. I love my rifle. I didn't want to give it back.
Robert Nichols, machine gunner, U.S. Navy, North Adams, Massachusetts. William Parsons, radioman 1st, Navy, May, Idaho. Calvin Pachetta, chief gunner, Navy, USS New Mexico, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Lewis Pattison, lieutenant, Navy, Smiley, Texas. Gerald Pedersen, PPC, Marine Corps, Long Beach, California. John Pildner, PFC, Army, North Cumberland, Pennsylvania. William Pinto, Wiper, U.S. Merchant Marine, World War II, U.S. Army, Korean War, Rodeo, California. Douglas Plate, Vice Admiral, San Diego, California. J. Roberts, Coxswain, Navy, Spring City, Texas. Bobby Ross, Head Messman, Merchant Marine, Mobile, Alabama. Kenneth Saff, First Lieutenant, Army Air Force, Kane, Pennsylvania. Philip Sagioni, Seaman, 2nd Class Navy, Wilmington, Delaware. Gilbert Sanchez, 52, 2nd Class Radar, Navy, Coast Guard, Ruth, Nevada. Thomas Schonecker, SN2 Navy, Albany, New York. Gordon Scott, Chief Petty Officer, Navy, San Francisco, California. John Scott, EM-1 Navy, USS Malloy, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. John Seward, M1C Quartermaster, 1st Class, Navy, Wisconsin Rapids, Wisconsin. Jerry Smith, U.S. Navy, Winsboro, Louisiana. Edward Souza, CRM Chief Radioman, U.S. Navy, USS Remy, Santa Clara, California. Harold Staggs, Torpedo Man, 1st Class, Navy, Pasadena, California. Beatrice Thaler, Army Air Corps, Reno, Nevada. Edward Tremper, Corporal, U.S. Marine Corps, North Plainfield, New Jersey. Thomas Voucher, Lieutenant Colonel, Army Air Corps, Mission, Texas. Joe Watson, Fireman, 1st Class, U.S. Navy, Appomattox, Virginia. Kenneth Wells, PFC, 6th Marine Division, Ottawa, Ohio. Robert Wheeler, musician, 1st Class Navy, San Diego, California.
On Victory Day, I'm waiting to be, I was on Attu, Alaska, in a patrol bombing squadron, the same one I'd been in for 3 years, and we were preparing to be part of the northern invasion force for Japan, but they canceled the northern part. Well, they didn't cancel it. The war was over after the bomb. The victory turned out to be far better than most of us anticipated, because there was a tremendous amount of fatalities forecast for a military assault on Japan.
I think people were so elated they didn't even think about the future, the after. They were just just such a happy, people were just out of it when the war ended. VE Day and VJ Day, God, they were, we weren't here, we were still overseas, but what we saw, you know, and heard, I think people were happy, got rid of that, all the problems, a lot of problems, and then everybody turned to make a life for themselves.
It's no longer an option. That's what Douglas said in his speech that day. He said that the history of trying to solve international relations through war isn't going to be possible anymore. And it isn't possible until we go and not just pursue peace, but peace more than the absence of violence is peace where all people and all nations have the same goals that we have as a nation, but which we haven't as a goal, but we haven't put it into practice.
Thank you. All these ladies and gentlemen had indicated a desire to be here today. I'd also like to take a moment to honor the memory of all those World War II veterans who are no longer with us and those who cannot be physically with us today. A special tribute goes out to Art Albert, a World War II crewman of the USS Missouri. You may remember Art. He joined us every year for this commemoration ceremony for the past 18 years. And his goal was to be here for the 75th anniversary as well. Art and the USS Missouri were destined to be linked in memory for all time. On January 29, 1944, the USS Missouri was launched at Brooklyn Naval Shipyard. It was also Art's 17th birthday and the day he reported for duty on board the Mighty Mo. Art witnessed major historical events during his service aboard this ship. Following the kamikaze attack against the Missouri on April 11, 1945, Art helped push the wing of the Japanese airplane into the ocean, suffering minor injuries from the attack. 75 years ago today, on September 2, 1945, Art witnessed Douglas MacArthur pull up on the port side of the ship and depart from his destroyer Tin Can, as Art said, like he was getting out of a taxi in New York City. Art was also part of the crew that carried President Harry Truman to a conference in Rio de Janeiro in 1947. Art served on the Mighty Mo until his 21st birthday. Art loved this ship. He was immensely proud to be part of her story, and he looked forward to coming back here every year to remember this special anniversary in world history. He, as well as each of you sitting here today, and the many others that have gone before him, are some of our greatest treasures. Sadly, Art passed away 3 months ago on June 3rd, but we feel his spirit here today and know he is smiling down upon us as we remember his fellow shipmates and all other World War II veterans who fought to protect our freedoms on this historic anniversary. Please join me in a moment of silence to honor this special veteran and someone I'm proud to have called my friend, Art Albert, and all the World War II veterans who have passed away. Thank you so much. We're honored to have many other dignitaries joining us this morning that I'd like to recognize at this time. Please hold your applause until all the parties have been mentioned. Governor David Ige, who will be offering the opening remarks for today's ceremony of commemoration and honor. Our distinguished guest speaker, Admiral Phil Davidson, Commander of the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command. And delivering the keynote address for today's ceremony is Secretary Mark Esper, the U.S. Secretary of Defense. Please recognize them. I'd now like to take a moment to share a message from Senators Bob and Elizabeth Dole, honorary co-chairpersons of the National 75th Commemoration of the End of World War II. This is their message. When we were invited to co-chair today's commemoration, surrounded by the sacred waters of Pearl Harbor, we knew only the most extraordinary circumstances would keep us from joining you in person. Like everyone, we never imagined such circumstances would come to pass. Please know our hearts are with you this morning, and despite the distance, we are honored to co-chair this momentous occasion alongside our dear friend, Linda Hope. As a combat-wounded soldier, the youngest sister of an Iwo Jima survivor, and two proud advocates for our veterans, their families, and their caregivers, we know well the devastation and tragedy of war. At the same time, we have seen war summon the greatest qualities which humans are capable: courage beyond measure, loyalty beyond words, sacrifice, ingenuity, and endurance beyond imagining. The attack on this harbor echoed across the ocean to the mainland, ringing from coast to coast as a great call to action. When that call was heard, the entire nation responded. Perhaps no generation since our founders better understood that if they attempted to meet the moment while divided, they would not succeed. If they allowed the burden of the war to be shouldered by a precious few, they could not win. And if they did not find their path to victory, the future of our nation and freedom itself might perish from the earth. The World War II generation eliminated one of the greatest threats to peace in the world that the world has ever known. Yet incredibly, that was not all they gave to our nation. Those Americans showed future generations the sacrifice that we must sometimes make to preserve and protect freedom. They demonstrate the insurmountable odds that our country can overcome when we act as one. Most importantly, they provided that even in moments darkened by uncertainty and despair, there is tremendous hope. Through unity, through selflessness, America can always find a way. May God bless the souls who lost their lives in World War II and the service members who restored the world's peace, and may God forever bless the United States of America. Bob and Elizabeth Dole. Next, please join me in welcoming the co-chairs of the 75th World War II Committee, General Darrell Wong and Captain Steve Colon, and other members of the committee. Please stand. We began today's commemoration ceremony at 9:02 a.m., which was the time when the surrender ceremony began to bring an end to the most destructive war in world history. On September 2nd, 1945, it was a cloudy, dreary morning in Tokyo Bay, perfect weather for such a somber ceremony. More than 250 Allied warships encircled the Missouri with over 900 fighters and bombers in the air, representing 10 nations whose forces fought in the war. Top military leaders from the Allied forces and Imperial Japan gathered aboard this magnificent battleship. USS Missouri crew members were jammed together on the decks, on all levels, and atop the gun turrets, everyone wanted to witness history being made. The world was listening and watching as well, as dozens of news outlets and journalists who recorded the ceremony and captured each moment for future generations to remember for all time. Now, if you're able, please rise for the parading of the colors and remain standing for the performance of our national anthem and Hawaii Pono'i. Colors will be administered by the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command Honor Guard. Our national anthem will be performed by MU-2 Emily Kershaw, along with music by the United States Pacific Fleet Band, and Hawaii Pono'i by the United States Marine Corps Forces Pacific Band, sung by Julius Mina. Today is also a celebrated day in Hawaii's history. On this day, September 2nd, 1838, Queen Liliuokalani was born. She was the last and only Queen Regnant and the last sovereign monarch of the Hawaiian Kingdom. Color Guard, parade the colors.
Color Guard, attention, forward, march. Left, 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 right, left, 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 right, left, 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 right, left, left. Mark time, march. Left, 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 right, left, left turn, march. Present. Arms.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Order, arms. Ready, two.
Hawaii ponoi nanai komoi kanani ali pe ali makualani e kamehameha na kawae me kaihe makualani e kamehameha na kawae me kaihe.
Color Guard, post the colors.
Ready, two. Unseat, color. Forward, march. Left, 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 right, left, 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 right, left, 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 right, left. Mark time, march. Left, left. Deep time. left, left, right, left, 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 right. Mark time, march! Detail, halt! Colors, face! Forward, march! Left, 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 right, left.
Offering the Queen's Prayer this morning is Marlene Sy. Here she is.
Lydia Kamakaeha Lili Uokalani, our last reigning monarch of Hawaii, born on September 2, 1838. Known as a prolific songwriter, a hymn written by the Queen, known as the Queen's Prayer, on March 22, 1895, while imprisoned in Iolani Palace. She asks for the Lord's protection, mercy, and loving kindness, and forgiveness of those who wronged her. Peace will be our wish, now and forevermore. Amen. O koloano, aia ikalani, o ko oia ia, he molele hoi, mai na ino ino, na heva o kanaka, a ka e hui kala, ama e no laila e kaku, malalo ko e ko ma ko maluhia, amau loa kuno, amen.
Thank you, Marlene. Please be seated. "75 years ago, the Japanese delegation had no idea what to expect upon boarding the U.S. Missouri to sign the formal documents agreeing to Japan's unconditional surrender to the Allied forces. For nearly 4 years, the war in the Pacific had raged as a series of epic, ferocious, and brutal battles on land, at sea, and in the air. The United States and Japan were fueled by a deep hatred for each other. Foreign Minister Mamoru Shigemitsu and the rest of the Japanese delegation stood across from General Douglas MacArthur as he signed the instrument of surrender as the Supreme Commander of the Allied forces. Then the following countries also signed in this order: Fleet Admiral Chester Nimitz for the United States, General Su Hyung Chang for China, Admiral Sir Bruce Fraser for the United Kingdom, Lieutenant General Kuzma Derevyanko for the Soviet Union, General Sir Thomas Blamey for Australia, Colonel Lawrence Moore Cosgrave for Canada, General de Corps d'Armée Philippe Leclerc from France, Lieutenant Admiral C.E.L. Helfrich for the Netherlands, and Vice Air Marshal Leonard M. Isett for New Zealand. The ceremony, though, was not one of vengeance or hatred. Instead, the Japanese delegation heard words advocating for a lasting peace that would plant the seeds for a bond of friendship that has grown stronger with each generation. With the rest of the world listening intently, General MacArthur not only brought an end to the bloodiest war in modern history, he also set the tone for the peace and friendship between the U.S. and Japan that continues 75 years later. We'll now play a video of General MacArthur's remarks from the surrender ceremony. I encourage you to listen carefully to his chosen words and imagine the significance of their meaning when they were delivered, just days after the fighting had ended.
It is my earnest hope, and indeed the hope of all mankind, that from this solemn occasion a better world shall emerge out of the blood and carnage of the past. A world founded upon faith and understanding. A world dedicated to the dignity of man and the fulfillment of his most cherished wish for freedom, tolerance, and justice. As Supreme Commander for the Allied Powers, I announce it my firm purpose, in the tradition of the countries I represent, to proceed in the discharge of my responsibilities with justice and tolerance, while taking all necessary dispositions to ensure that the terms of surrender are fully, promptly, and faithfully complied with. Let us pray that peace be now restored to the world, and that God will preserve it always. These proceedings are closed.
These proceedings are closed. With those four powerful words, the deadliest war came to an end. At the conclusion of the ceremony, over 900 fighters and bombers that had been in the air over Tokyo Bay dropped down and flew over the Missouri. Fighting for peace came with heavy sacrifices by all, but we would like to offer our eternal gratitude to the memory of all those service members who fought so bravely, often to their death, to make the freedoms we enjoy today possible. Today we gather on was once used as an instrument of war, but has since instead evolved into an altar of peace and reconciliation. I'd like to call upon Steve Colon, Chairman of the Board of Directors of the USS Missouri Memorial Association and co-chair of the 75th Commemoration Committee, to say a few remarks and introduce our first guest speaker. In 2006, Steve retired as a captain after serving 26 years in the Navy and Navy Reserve. One of his career highlights includes serving aboard the USS Adroit during Operation Desert Storm as the operations officer, as they escorted the USS Missouri into combat operations in support of the ground war and witnessed the mighty battleship's 16-inch guns firing. Steve now serves as president of Hunt Development Group, LLC's Hawaii Division. Please welcome Steve Colon.
Thank you, Mike. Ship looks great. You should be very proud of your crew. Mr. Secretary, Admiral Davidson, Governor Ige, flag and general officers, distinguished visitors, and most importantly, our World War II veterans, welcome and aloha. On behalf of the USS Missouri Memorial Association, it is an honor to welcome you, as well as those joining us from all over the world, to remember this momentous day in our nation's history. But first, as chairman of this amazing organization, I'd like to take a moment to remember someone who's not here with us today, but I know he's looking down on us. My good friend and mentor and predecessor, Tim Gard, served in this organization for 25 years and was our chairman since 2014. His passion for the Missouri pushed us and encouraged us to ensure the Mighty Mo would be a memorial we could all be proud of. I know how badly Tim wanted to be part of this ceremony, and it still saddens me that we lost him before that could happen. Tim, we miss you. I know you're here with us, though, in spirit. I can't tell you how proud I am of the job our Missouri crew members have done to get this ship ready for today. Those of you who are here with us are witnessing it firsthand, and I hope those watching from their homes can get an idea of the remarkable condition of this historic vessel. Our crew members are committed to preserving this iconic battleship and sharing her story and place in our nation's history. And what a story that is. 75 years ago today, this ship was witness to arguably the most important surrender in our world's history. To our Missouri staff and volunteers, well done on getting her ready for this special occasion. We're grateful for the dedication and commitment to sharing the USS Missouri's story and her place in history. I know these 6 months have been trying on you, and I have to tell you that going forward, we will be sailing into some rough seas. But like the greatest generation before us, I know we will persevere, and someday soon, we'll be welcoming visitors back to see this national treasure. Mahalo nui also to my 75th anniversary World War II Commemoration Committee co-chair, General Darrell Wong, as well as all of our committee members who are here and watching for the hard work in planning these events. It was been a very challenging environment. Bravo Zulu to all of you. To our World War II veterans here and watching from afar, we once again remember and thank you for the sacrifices that you made. We will never forget, and we will always honor your service. So let's go ahead and hear from our distinguished guests who have joined us today. First up will be Governor Ige, who will help reflect and remember on that day in Tokyo and how it resonates for all of us. Both he and Admiral Davidson served as the 75th World War II Commemoration Committee co-chairs. And I was honored to be serving with both of you. Governor Ige is the 8th governor of the state of Hawaii. He's the first governor of Okinawan ancestry. He's also the son of a decorated veteran of the 442nd Regimental Combat Team that fought so heroically in World War II. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me give a warm welcome to Governor David Ige.
Good morning. It is my honor to welcome everyone, both here and across the nation and the world, to the USS Missouri. On this day, on this deck, 75 years ago, we marked the end in the Pacific theater of a great global war that touched every man, woman, and child of my parents' generation. The war took the lives of so many on all sides, leaving a vacuum in the roles of those who could have been, who should have been, our scientists, teachers, community leaders, farmers, and shopkeepers. They should have been our classmates, our neighbors, and our co-workers. They were our sons and daughters, our brothers and sisters, and our fathers and mothers. Victory came at a high price, paid by those who suffered and died on the front lines, as well as by those who endured hardship and uncertainty on the home front. It was won by an abiding belief in freedom and democracy, and by the strength of character, courage, and resilience that defied all odds. It was won by a generation defined as the greatest, not only by what they achieved in war, but by the peace and prosperity they created after it. Their legacy is the hope and the world order they passed on to all of us. Like Hawaii's late Senator Danny Noy, my own father, who served in the famed 442nd Regimental Combat Team, they returned home to fulfill the promise of citizenship and contribute to a life where all things are possible for everyone. Like you, I stand on the shoulders of all of these men and women and can stake my claim to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness because of their actions. After the war, they transformed their fight against tyranny into a life based on the democratic values and purpose, showing us that democracy must not only be defended at all costs, but lived along all avenues by you and me doing what we do each and every day. That is vigilance. That is resilience. That is courage. We look at history because it tells us where we've been. We study history because it teaches us how to discover where we want to go. I don't have to tell you that this remembrance has been dramatically scaled back from original plans because of the ongoing pandemic. And perhaps that's for the best. In moments like these, we tend to get caught up in the pomp and circumstance and sometimes forget the real reason why we gather, all of these veterans. Moreover, we tend to toss the label hero around freely these days, but these veterans truly exemplify the strictest definition of heroic. Their actions stand up to the rigid test of the heroic, and their lives set an example for all of us to follow. Some compare fighting a pandemic akin to fighting a global war. That may or may not be an accurate comparison. What I do know is that we cannot go wrong in following their example in the face of any adversity. Their courage under fire, strength of character, resilience over time provides a clear roadmap for us to follow in all that we do, whether we are fighting social injustice or a virus. And so there remains only one thing left for us to say to them. Thank you. Thank you. And we pray they grasp the depth of those words and the immensity of our debt. God bless you all. Thank you and aloha.
Thank you, Governor Ige. I'd also like to recognize Dawn Amano Ige, the Governor's wife, who's with us today. Mrs. Ige. General Mark A. Milley, the 20th Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, would like to take this opportunity to pay tribute and to thank our World War II veterans for their bravery and sacrifice in service to our nation. We remain indebted to the veterans whose service demonstrated the selfless action of the greatest generation, who not only served to protect and defend our nation, but were part of the global force to defend peace. Ladies and gentlemen, General Mark Milley, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
The greatest generation that took up arms to defend freedom against tyranny in the Second World War fought for something. They fought for a better peace. And from the ashes of the destruction and bloodshed of that war, that terrible war, they established a rules-based global order rooted in political and economic liberty that has stood for over 7 decades. My father and mother were part of that generation. My father trained here in Hawaii, on Maui, and from here made the assault landings at Kwajalein, Saipan, Tinian, and Iwo Jima with the 4th Marine Division, while my mother served at a Navy hospital in Seattle, taking care of the wounded, coming back from the Pacific Theater. I often reflect on my parents' service to this nation, and the lessons I take from their example have shaped my views on this nation's role and place in the world. My parents instilled in me a sense of service and an understanding of how lucky I am to be an American, how lucky I was to grow up in a country where we have freedoms of speech, press, religion, and all the other rights that we enjoy on a daily basis. Today, those with firsthand knowledge of World War II are becoming fewer and fewer. And so we all must never forget the horrific cost of great power war and the sacrifices of those that went before us. As the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, on behalf of every soldier, sailor, airman, Marine, and Coast Guardsman, more than 2.3 million of us that wear the uniform today, we all extend our sincerest thanks to our World War II veterans for granting us the gift of freedom. And we renew our commitment to preserve the Constitution and the values you fought so hard to preserve.
We're honored to have one of our honorary Blue Ribbon Leadership co-chairs with us today, Admiral Philip Davidson, Commander, U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, America's oldest and largest military combatant command. As a surface warfare officer, Admiral Davidson has deployed across the globe in frigates, destroyers, cruisers, and aircraft carriers, and he has held command at every level. At U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, he is responsible for all U.S. military activities in the Indo-Pacific, covering 36 nations, 14 time zones, and more than 50% of the world's population. Ladies and gentlemen, the Commander, U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, Admiral Phil Davidson.
Aloha and good morning. I would like to begin by thanking all the members of the 75th World War II Commemoration Committee for safely bringing these phenomenal events together in this environment. We are honored today to have the Secretary of Defense here with us to help commemorate the occasion, as well as his wife, Leah. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. We're grateful that you could both be here today. I'd like to thank General Milley for joining us virtually and for his moving remarks. And of course, thank you, Governor Ige, for your inspiring words. They underscore the significance of the state of Hawaii's magnificent relationship with our armed forces. As we celebrate the 75th anniversary of the end of World War II and our Allied victory in the Pacific, we remain forever indebted to our World War II veterans. They helped defend the world from tyranny. We are deeply honored that those from Hawaii, some of those very same veterans, could join us today in person, with many more joining us virtually around the globe. And indeed, the rest of them are here with us in spirit on the historic deck of the USS Missouri. This battleship both signal of strength and symbol of peace, owes much of its legacy to the 33rd President of the United States, Harry S. Truman. It was hardly a surprise when President Truman selected the USS Missouri as the formal site to officially end the war. After all, the proud Missouri native's only child, Margaret, served as this ship's sponsor, and President Truman spoke at this ship's christening and also attended her commissioning. Well, one can only imagine how President Truman hoped the pride and joy of his home state would live on in the hearts and minds of Americans for years to come. And I mention this for two important reasons. First, to highlight that the Mighty Mo, this iconic American museum today, is the epitome of the arsenal of democracy that willed us to victory. In part, honoring the men and women of our greatest generation who supported the war effort in factories and shipyards across the country. And of course, the second reason is to provide a clear reminder of how the history of September 2nd, 1945 lives on. September 2nd is the day that the United States and our allies turned tragedy into triumph, violence into victory, fighting into freedom, loss into liberty, and peril into peace. A day that marks the very beginning of the rules-based international order, an order responsible for some 75 years of peace, prosperity, and security that helped not only to liberate hundreds of millions, but to lift billions out of poverty, and all to a level of prosperity previously unseen in human history. Certainly, the post-war period of regional peace and stability must not be taken for granted. Today, the world faces great challenges. You heard Governor Ige talk about the coronavirus pandemic. But as well, an emboldened Communist Party of China seeks to change the world to one in which Chinese national power is more important than international law. Beijing is using a whole-of-party approach to coerce, to corrupt, and to contest the rules-based international order. Today, as we address the strategic threat of China and the other security challenges throughout the Indo-Pacific region, the memory of our greatest generation lives on. It lives on in our soldiers, our sailors, our airmen, Marines, and our Coast Guardsmen today. Each and every day, we remember our World War II heroes, and we pay tribute to them by continuing to defend the values of a free and open Indo-Pacific, to keep America, our allies, and our partners free from tyranny, and defend our shared values, our inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. May God bless all the veterans of World War II, the men and women of the armed forces, the great state of Hawaii, and indeed, may God bless the United States of America. Thank you. Now, as I mentioned before, we are joined today by the Secretary of Defense, Dr. Mark Esper. Secretary Esper is a graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point, Harvard University, and George Washington University. He is a proud Gulf War veteran and former Army infantry officer. From the moment that he assumed office in July of 2019, Secretary Esper has been relentless in implementing our national defense strategy, and he remains committed to focusing the Department of Defense on the Indo-Pacific theater. He joins us today in the midst of his travels throughout the region to engage with allies and partners, observe high-end military exercises, meet with our service members, and of course, today to honor our veterans. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce our keynote speaker, the 27th Secretary of Defense, the Honorable Dr. Mark Esper.
Aloha, everyone. And thank you for joining us on this special day. Thank you, Admiral Davidson, for that kind introduction. Thank you, General Milley, for your words. And thank you, Governor Ige, for the warm welcome and hospitality. On behalf of President Trump, thank you all for being here today. It is my great honor to be on the deck of this historic ship as we commemorate the 75th anniversary of the end of World War II and commemorate and reflect on the sacrifices and victories of our service members and allies who helped fight for and secure peace. I would like to extend a very special welcome to the members of the greatest generation here with us this morning, whose remarkable stories of courage and heroism are forever etched into our nation's heart and history. It is because of your selfless service and your sacrifice that we live in peace and prosperity today. And it is your legacy that inspires us in our efforts to uphold the freedoms and values for which you so nobly fought. Thank you all very much. It is fitting that we are gathered here today on the USS Missouri, where the conflict in the Pacific came to an end on this day in 1945. This ship, which was built for war, has since been dedicated to peace and reconciliation. It now rests in the very harbor where more than 2,400 Americans paid the ultimate price nearly 8 decades ago at the beginning of World War II. This morning, we pay tribute to all those we lost on that infamous date in 1941, and to the millions more who demonstrated our collective resolve and commitment to freedom in the years of war and hardship that followed. We remember heroes like Floyd Welch, an electrician's mate who helped save the lives of more than 30 sailors trapped in the sinking USS Oklahoma. With pinpoint precision, he cut holes in the ship's hull, freeing the sailors without igniting fuel cells. And we honor sailors like Mess Attendant Dory Miller, the namesake of the Navy's newest aircraft carrier. Miller assisted his mortally wounded captain aboard the USS West Virginia, then manned an anti-aircraft gun, and with no formal training, blunted the onslaught of enemy fighters and bombers. Since then, the memory of these men and those we lost in the attack on December 7th has served as an eternal reminder of the consequences of war, the human toll and tragedy, the debt paid in freedom's name, and the imperative of remaining ever vigilant. Throughout the war, millions of our countrymen answered the nation's call with great courage and selflessness. Americans of all faiths, races, and ethnicities, from all walks of life and vocation, rich to poor, and from all corners of the country, from cities to suburbs to farms. They left behind their loved ones, men and women alike, to sail across oceans and join allies in a desperate fight for liberty. From the deserts of Tunisia to the islands of Midway, and from the beaches of Normandy to the hills of Iwo Jima, these intrepid patriots stood arm in arm and shoulder to shoulder with our allies, determined to achieve total victory no matter how long it took. Meanwhile, on the home front, millions of other Americans served as civil defense volunteers, learning essential skills such as first aid, air defense, and firefighting. Many more bought war bonds, rationed consumer goods, and recycled scarce materials. Entrepreneurs, innovators, and production workers transformed assembly lines and industrial plants into the arsenal of democracy, ensuring military production kept pace with the needs of our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guardsmen. And most importantly, though often separated by great distances and different challenges, the American people forged an unbreakable commitment to the cause of liberty, one that lives on to this day. World War II was an inflection point for the history of our great nation and for humanity writ large. The global fight against tyranny and oppression cost more than 70 million lives and caused unimaginable loss for the United States and our allies. Virtually no household was left untouched by the scale or scope of its wanton destruction. The human toll of the deadliest conflict in history led to the creation of a new world out of the rubble of the old, one that began with Imperial Japan's surrender on this ship 75 years ago. The war fundamentally altered the global balance of power and reshaped the international order into one led by like-minded nations, grounded in common purpose and shared values that prepared them well for a decades-long struggle against Soviet communism that would soon follow. In the aftermath of World War II, the United States assumed the mantle and the responsibility of leadership, recognizing that the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans would no longer protect us from conflicts started abroad, from ideologies with hegemonic ambitions, or from governments with malign intentions. It was America's time to lead, and we did so, guided by our founding principles and core values. The United States rose to the challenge. We built relationships with like-minded nations based on reciprocal trade, not predatory economics, based on respect for the sovereignty of all countries, not a strategy of might makes right, based on a commitment to always honoring our international obligations, not just when they serve our interests, and most importantly, based on our enduring values and beliefs. The result was today's international rules-based order that has provided security, prosperity, and stability to billions of people around the world for over a half-century. It set new standards and protocols when it comes to matters of trade and diplomacy. It raised the bar when it comes to human rights and individual freedoms. And it created new expectations regarding the use of force and the way countries should treat one another. Today, in the face of new challenges to this free and open order, we are working to build an even broader coalition of partners, one that includes both longtime friends and former adversaries, to protect the hard-fought gains of generations past and present, especially in the Pacific. We share an important goal, defending the sacred principles that benefit us all: democracy, liberty, sovereignty, human rights, mutual respect, and the rule of law. To do so, we continue to forge new partnerships and strengthen our existing ones. From our alliances with Japan, South Korea, and Australia, to our long collaboration with ASEAN countries, India, New Zealand, and the Pacific Island countries. Growing, deepening, and unifying this network must remain central to our collective strategy to ensure peace and prosperity for another 75 years and beyond. We welcome every nation, especially those that have benefited most from today's international system, to join us in this effort. For decades, the United States and our partners have based our efforts on the belief that today's free and open order, however imperfect, is worth fighting for. And while this system has largely remained intact, we cannot take it for granted or leave its future up to chance. That is why, together, we are committed to improving it and remain ready to defend it, much like the greatest generation did when history called and fate challenged. 75 years ago today, the great American naval hero, Admiral Chester Nimitz, sent a message to the Pacific Fleet regarding the end of the war. He reflected on the heavy cost of victory and our solemn obligation to the fallen, which was, in his words, quote, "the obligation to ensure that their sacrifice will help to make this a better and safer world in which to live." Our work today continues in this spirit. As we look to the path ahead, we honor the legacy of those who came before us and recommit ourselves to defending today's international rules and norms so that the world is safer and is better for generations yet to come. This means embracing the importance of what President Ronald Reagan called peace through strength, and building a military and alliance structure to match that imperative. The United States' commitment to the world today is the same one we made to the freedom-loving people of the world in 1941, that we will remain ready to fight any foe and defend any friend, and that we will safeguard our values and all that we hold dear at every turn, in every place. We will not back down, and we will not yield. Freedom is far too precious to do otherwise, and the sacrifice of those who came before us is far too great. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for commemorating this historic anniversary with us today. May God bless the members of the greatest generation and all of our veterans, service members, and allies across the globe. And may God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
That was U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper delivering the keynote address at this commemoration for the 75th anniversary of the ending of World War II. Let's take a listen back as that ceremony continues.
And guide her through the night with the light from above, from the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans, white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
Thank you, Secretary Esper, for today, and also like to acknowledge his wife Leah, who is joining us this morning. And thank you, Admiral Davidson. We'd also like to acknowledge your wife Tracy, who is also with us today. There's actually a third reason why the Davidsons are so fond of this ship. That's because they're both from St. Louis, Missouri. As such, they love this ship. Our thanks also go out to General Wilson, a retired petty officer, first class for the United States Navy, and his wonderful performance of an iconic song that's an inspiring favorite for us all. On an early Sunday morning on September 2nd, 1945, aboard the new 45,000-ton battleship USS Missouri and before representatives of 9 allied nations, the Empire of Japan signed a written agreement that formalized the end of hostilities in World War II. In honoring of our shared history, the following nations have placed wreaths on the deck of the USS Missouri as a sign of respect and tribute to the men and women who lost their lives during World War II. Australia, Brunei Darussalam, Canada, France, Federal Germany, Japan, Myanmar, New Zealand, the Philippines, Portugal, Russia, Singapore, South Korea, United Kingdom, and the United States of America. Offering flowers is a ritual that occurs around the world, symbolizing the beauty and brevity of life. As we honor the past, let us remember that what defines our relationships with our allies and partners is a deep-rooted mutual trust, friendship, support, and cooperation. It was our collective commitment and sacrifice during World War II that established the foundations of the free and open Indo-Pacific that benefits all nations today. As we look to secure our future, let us reaffirm our commitment to maintain a peaceful and prosperous world. We now wish to remember all those service members who made the ultimate sacrifice in defense of our country and to the freedoms that all of us enjoy. We'd like to ask all of you who are able to please stand for this portion of the program as we pay tribute to all fallen service members. First, with a moment of silence, followed by a rifle salute. Thank you. Please be seated. As our ceremony draws to a close, we thank all of you for joining us this morning to commemorate the 75th anniversary of the end of World War II. Thank you to our guest speakers, Governor Ige, Admiral Davidson, Secretary Esper. And a special thanks to our 75th World War II commemoration sponsors, including presenting sponsor, the Bob Hope Legacy, as part of the Bob and Dolores Hope Foundation, who made the vision and commitment of this ceremony possible.
It gives me great pleasure to share a welcoming message from Linda Hope of the Bob Hope Legacy, representing the Bob and Dolores Hope Foundation. Their generous support of the World War II 75th commemoration ensures that the legacy of all veterans continues to inspire and motivate our children, those who are destined to lead our future.
World War II was a pivotal moment in American and world history. When the freedom of the world was threatened, millions of Americans rose to its defense. They fought in combat in Europe, North Africa, and the Pacific, helped build the arsenal of democracy in our factories, and raise the spirits of our troops, as my dad Bob Hope and many of his fellow entertainers did. Everyone played a role in achieving victory and establishing an enduring peace. Bob Hope, with a small band of performers, traveled to bases throughout the U.S. and around the globe to entertain our service members, visiting hospitals and installations in theaters of war in Europe and the South Pacific. Travel to those distant locations was grueling, and the conditions upon arrival were often dangerous. Yet those were the shows most near and dear to Bob's heart, and to the hearts of the hundreds of thousands of troops who never forgot the taste of home and hope he brought them. As we commemorate 75 years since the end of World War II, we salute our service members and the everyday Americans who contributed to the war effort for their heroic actions. Their patriotism still inspires us and will continue to inspire Americans forever. We promise to carry their stories forward, instilling in our future leaders a new appreciation for the sacrifices made by the entire generation that truly defined the spirit of America.
Most of all, we'd like to thank all of our veterans who've protected our country and its people, as well as the men and women who are currently serving in the armed forces for displaying courage and commitment to duty at all times. Our nation honors you and your continued perseverance to protect our freedoms. Here at the Battleship Missouri Memorial, we always stand with you and remain firmly dedicated to upholding the values confirmed on this day 75 years ago. Please stand for the benediction by Captain Jim Edwards, U.S. Marine Corps Forces Pacific Chaplain.
Let us pray. Almighty God, we have commemorated this morning the 75th anniversary of the end of the Second World War on this historic battleship. We have remembered those who served their country with distinction during years of hard-fought battles at sea, under the sea, on land, and in the sky above. We have remembered, too, those who gave the ultimate sacrifice, not only for their country, but also for the friends fighting at their side, and for the freedoms that we still hold most dear. We thank you, God, for the inspiration of those who went before us. May we leave this place with a greater appreciation of the examples set for us by the veterans that fought so valiantly throughout the Second World War. We also thank you for peace, a peace that we continually seek to preserve. So as we leave this site of honor, grant us now your peace and your blessing. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Captain Edwards. Please be seated. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Ed Hawkins of the City and County of Honolulu on behalf of the City of Nagaoka.
We will now see fireworks that were launched last night as a gift from the city of Nagaoka, Japan. Nagaoka is a sister city of Honolulu. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, a native of Nagaoka, planned the attack on Pearl Harbor. Nagaoka was devastated by American bombers in the waning days of World War II. These fireworks are to underscore peace and reconciliation between Japan and the United States since the end of World War II. 3 white chrysanthemum-shaped fireworks will be launched. First, in honor of the greatest generation, those who served, who brought peace to the world through their service and sacrifice in this great war. Second, in honor of all those who gave their last full measure of service, who gave their lives to secure the peace that we enjoy today. Third, hope for continued peace in the world and for the future of our children and our children's children so that they may enjoy the blessings of peace and freedom.
Mahalo for joining us at this historic occasion this morning. If I could ask if you could all wait for our World War II veterans to exit first and then proceed after them. Ladies and gentlemen, these proceedings are closed.
Will Dupree, once again here in the KXAN Live studio. We've reached the end of this hours-long ceremony commemorating the 75th anniversary of the ending of World War II. This ceremony taking place in Pearl Harbor, there at the museum commemorating the attack which launched this war. Thank you all again so much for watching. I'm Will Dupree. Once again, we appreciate you joining us for this long. Please, everyone, stay safe and stay healthy, and if at all possible, still at home. Have a good day, everyone.